Hello, how you doing? And welcome back to the channel. The Champions Cup final is here. Will Leinster get a fifth star, or are La Rochelle going to go back-to-back in the competition? That's what I'm talking about in this video. So make sure you drop a comment down below. Who do you think is going to win this weekend? My heart says one side, my head says another. So I'm going to get into all of that in the video. If you can like the video and subscribe to the channel as well, then I'd massively, massively appreciate it. But let's get into it. So at this moment in time, my heart says La Rochelle will win and my head says that Leinster will. I think it's going to be a brilliant game, but I'm really struggling to balance it out between those two sides and truly give my prediction for who the winner is going to be. By the end of this video, I will go one way or the other, but honestly, it's still up in the air because I think it is a bit of a flip of a coin, this game, ultimately. Two brilliant sides, a Leinster side who every year really in this competition, certainly for the last 5-6 years, probably beyond that, are always one of the favourites. And La Rochelle, who have a really good record in the competition over the last few years, the defending champions, looking to win it back to back, and this their third final in a row as well. So two sides that are worthy of being there, and I hope serve up a game that is worthy of the final as well, because I think the competition needs it, but I'll get onto that more later on in the video. Firstly then, this is a huge game. It's a huge game anyway. When you're crowning the Heineken Cup winners, it's in terms of domestic rugby for the Northern Hemisphere and now also for South Africa that they're in the competition. It is the pinnacle of domestic rugby. It's the best trophy you can win. So it's always massive. But I do think as well, Leinster losing to Munster in the semi-final of the URC last weekend to that drop goal in the closing stages of the game has just added another layer of intrigue and interest for this. Because if Leinster go 2 seasons in a row without silverware, and at this moment in time it's still an if, then it's a massive, massive letdown. You know, one season I think you could look at and say maybe they got a few things wrong. They were out-muscled on the day against La Rochelle or the Bulls or whoever it may be. But for that happening 2 years in a row for the quality of this Leinster team, I don't really think is acceptable. And the post-mortem could be pretty ugly. Having said that, if Leinster go and win the Champions Cup and get a record equaling 5th star on their jersey this weekend, then no one's going to mind, I think, the fact that they lost to Munster. It'll be a bit disappointing still because they know their quality and they know they're good enough to win the URC, but I think you'll be able to park that and move on because they'd be Champions Cup champions once more. But I do think it makes this game more interesting and it changes the dynamic a little bit as well. It puts more pressure on Leinster. And you've always got pressure in a final. I get all that. I'm sure people in the comments will say it's always a pressurised environment. But the context of this now, Leinster not winning silverware last year. They can't win the URC. This is their last chance. A competition that we know they've been gunning for probably since their defeat last year. They've got to get the job done. I think it makes it really, really interesting. So at this moment in time, I've written down here, Leinster favourites with a load of question marks after it. Now, I think they probably are favourites, and some of the stats, which I'll get onto in just a moment, kind of back that up. But La Rochelle haven't lost in this competition for 2 years. They beat Leinster last year. As I say, they're the defending champions. Their record in this competition is incredibly good, and I think if any team out there will have the belief that they can go and beat Leinster in Dublin, because let's not forget it's at the Aviva, it will be La Rochelle. It's why I think it's a great matchup, because I think there are a lot of other teams, and I think to a degree we probably saw this with Toulouse in the semi-final, that don't necessarily have the belief or don't necessarily have the firepower that they can go and beat Leinster away from home. I don't think La Rochelle are going to have that hurdle, that psychological hurdle to get over. They're going to go into Dublin as the defending champions, as a side who have got the better of this Leinster team within the last 12 months and believe that they can do it again. So I think Leinster are favourites. But, and this probably comes back to what I said at the start of the video where I said, my head's telling me one thing, my heart's telling me another. I feel like it's a little bit of a flip of a coin. I think it is a hard game to call. And I think also it's perhaps it's been made harder because of what we saw between Leinster and Munster. That we saw a Leinster side, and I know it's going to be a very different looking Leinster side when the teams are named tomorrow. I appreciate that. But I just think the fact that they were beatable, the fact that this team have just been an absolute juggernaut, they've steamed through this competition realistically up to this point. They haven't been particularly troubled. All of a sudden there's a slight chink in the armour. And I know they've got a heap of internationals that are going to come back in, which again kind of highlights the fact that the team selection they kind of got wrong in that game against Munster. But yeah, I do think it's tough to call. I really do. So how do they stop each other? This was something else I was trying to think about ahead of this video, is how did these two teams get the better of each other? How do they win the tactical battle between Leo Cullen and those coaches and Ronan O'Gara, the Munsterman? I mean, that's another interesting element, isn't it? O'Gara, the Munster legend, going into Dublin against Leinster with La Rochelle. I mean, there's so many different elements. But tactically, what do the coaches do? And what areas of the game do they have to get the better of, besides all the obvious usual points of gain line and ruck speed and all that sort of thing? So I was looking statistically at the competition and the team stats, and Leinster, as you would probably expect, are ahead on pretty much all statistical categories that you would use in a basic sense in terms of metres made, carries, points, tries scored, line breaks, all that sort of stuff. Leinster are the top side in the competition, which is probably fairly unsurprising. What did surprise me and what was quite interesting is for La Rochelle and the part of the stats column they were top of, which actually isn't an area that you want to be top of, which was penalties conceded in the competition, which I thought was quite interesting. I didn't necessarily expect that. And for me, La Rochelle, immediately you look at that, their discipline has to be good. Because if they give Leinster field position, if they give them penalties and possession, then this is a side who I think will punish them. So that for me is one of the big areas of this game, is La Rochelle's discipline good enough to not give field position and territory to Leinster? The other part of it as well, of course, is what we saw last year, where we saw Leinster struggle with the physicality of La Rochelle and of the Bulls as well in the URC when they were lost in that competition. They got stopped, didn't they, with the sheer physicality of the teams they came up against. And I think that's something that they have tried to correct this year. I think it's something they have obviously been a lot better at. In particular, I think I mentioned it after that match against Leicester, the quarter-final in Dublin, where it was an area of the game I just felt. And Leinster, in the context of the Gallagher Premiership, are one of the more physical sides, where Leinster completely had the better of them. They completely dominated them at the breakdown, in the maul, in the scrum, all that area. I think it's been somewhere they focused on. Is it good enough to match up to La Rochelle, get the better of them maybe? How does all that play out? I can't wait to see that really this weekend. I think that's pretty much everything. The last point I got down really, or the last few points, is Leinster have been so accustomed to bossing games. Are La Rochelle able to make life difficult for them? Are they able to keep it a tight game up to 60 minutes and maybe the nerves start kicking in with everything that's on the line? That could be another interesting element. The final thing that I wanted to say was I need this to be a good game. Personally, I need this to be a good game. I don't think the Champions Cup has been great this year. I think there's been some good games here and there. I think in the knockout stages we've lacked some of the drama that we maybe associate with the Heineken Cup in years gone by. I'm hoping this final can deliver for us a really tight game, one that could go either way, and maybe it's won by a piece of quality. Both these sides are good enough to win this game. I promised you a prediction at the end of the video. And you know what I think it could simply come down to, because these sides are both so good, is the fact that Leinster are at home. Something that I actually said as well for one of the Gallagher Premiership semi-finals for last weekend, where I said I picked Sale to beat Leicester because Sale were at home, and that's kind of how it panned out. It was one of those games where I looked at it and I thought if it's in a different venue, the result could go another way. But I do think that home field advantage could be key for Leinster. It could just be that thing that sways it in their favour. Playing at home is so massive in knockout rugby. The fact that the final is where it is, the fact that it's in Dublin, I think that might be the difference between the two sides. But we shall wait and see. Let me know who you think is going to win in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.